gotta get things started. Yeah.
In 3 years, we went from working with AWS to implement an encoding and scheduling initiative to go live to air with a live remote production.
By using AWS and live cloud production, it's easier to produce, and you can do that from anywhere.
Our business advantages with AWS and cloud production are immense. Everything from cost savings, our impact on sustainability, the actual content that we can create. It allows us to do things we've never been able to do before.
Are you ready? Let's do it.
So fired up.
NHL Edge Unlocked, a stats-heavy focused broadcast that we're gonna capture a part of hockey that isn't traditionally shown on a broadcast.
The fastest game on the planet. We're now collecting data at a rate that almost matches as fast as the brains of these athletes work.
We want to take the real-time live data and analytics into your living room.
It's the NHL DataCast powered by AWS. It's not math class, but some really cool stuff, all kinds of bells and whistles, especially with NHL Edge.
Fans are familiar with the concept of ice tilt, which is just a reference to one team taking the play to the other team. Well, AWS has found a way to track that using the chips in all 12 players' jerseys.
We're going to take you through all the stats, the insights, everything you see on the screen, and try to make it come to life.
It's a great testament to the way AWS helps us accelerate our innovation efforts.
Yay, welcome. I was told if you don't have the headphones that you can get the headphones, but I feel like we'll be okay. Yeah?
I think so.
All right. So welcome to this panel discussion with the NHL. We have Grant Nodine, SVP of Technology from the NHL, Brant Berglund, Senior Director of Coaching and Analytics, and all things
Close enough.
GM applications, and Andrew Rice, Business Development Principal here at AWS. We have been working together for a very long time, and we've done some really cool things, and we're going to sort of take a step back and talk about the journey we've been on together, because I think where we are now is a result of where we started and sort of the very methodical approach we took working together. And so we really started in a place several years ago with trying to get a lot of the NHL content to the cloud so that we could then start working with it. And that really was around a project we called Encoding and Scheduling. Let's talk about that a little bit. You want to start with this, Grant?
Sure. The biggest the thing that we realized early on was that there's a lot of work that you need to do before you can do the cool stuff, right? And that work is really the building blocks of what we've been what we put together last year in the live cloud production that we did. And really what it boiled down to is you can't do a live cloud production unless you have all of your video kind of already orchestrated into the cloud in a repeatable way. And so really what we built together was a system to use schedule-based automation, so takes our game schedule and essentially automates all of the AWS components that make up our video ecosystem, if you will. And so that's not only game program feeds, but it's also other camera feeds, isolated camera feeds, and there are a lot of syndication points for all of those feeds initially.
Right.
And so we started off very much just saying, we've got to get this video into the cloud so that we can do some of the things that we want to do with it, which is provide it to internal stakeholders for replay or review or whatever need they have, but also be able to provide it to licensees in other countries and to really make that as frictionless as it possibly could be. And so really the baby steps involved in that are quite a few, because you're really going and taking and deconstructing like everything that you've always done, so to speak, right? Yeah. And turning it in upside down on its head and saying, we're going to do things differently. And the journey was amazing, but it's all of the stuff that we learned along the way that was really the most valuable, right?
We're gonna have some good stories, I think, along the way. I'm gonna hit you up on one. So scheduling and coding, let's break that down a little bit. Andrew, I'm gonna let you walk through some architecture slides as well. But really, Grant, what you're talking about is pulling in all the feeds from all the arenas and having that all available in the cloud. Andrew, do you want to walk us a little bit through the architecture and how we did that?
Yeah, and at a high level, as Grant mentioned, it's laying the infrastructure, laying the groundwork of let's get video from all venues into the cloud in AWS. And as you saw on the last slide, that was a sample of a night where we had a proof of concept which we'll talk about later about production, but we were bringing in feeds as the NHL does every night through AWS out for distribution. But the beauty of it is then what? What can you do with it? But it all starts with laying the foundation of get your video up into the cloud, get it to distribution. And what you see here is really what the NHL really leaned into with AWS was creating an automated pipeline to make that easy and using AWS Elemental Media Connect to bring in those signals and distribute those signals, send them to Zixi, bring feeds back into S3 for archiving and then further distribution. But it really starts with that scheduling and automation so that users or folks working at the league don't have to turn on all of those channels and cloud infrastructure every night. And that leads into the next slide, which is, and I'll let Grant talk about this, but kind of that operator view to control those signals and potentially troubleshoot. But it's really, again, that automated pipeline streamlines that video ingest and distribution.
Yeah, I mean, this view is really part of the tool that came out of our efforts building, encoding, and scheduling. And this is an operator view that is showing you one device contributing a video feed into the cloud. The slide on the left lists all of the different feeds that come out of a building on a routine game night. On a live cloud production, we feed even more camera feeds into the cloud because we want isolated cameras that we don't necessarily bring every night. But the operator can literally go and drill down based on an individual feed and be able to see the entire chain of what happens with that feed, both from the device level to Media Connect to Media Live for producing streams. It makes sure that the actual streaming chunks and meta files are sitting on S3 as expected and are available. And then it goes and it looks at all of the entitlements that were provided to other parties through Media Connect and whether anyone is connected to them or not. And because if that person had called into our help center, they would be able to go and drill down directly to the Media Connect entitlement that they were consuming to be able to troubleshoot any kind of issue. And so really this tool really gives us advanced visibility into every component that we're spinning up in the cloud to be able to accomplish these jobs, whether they're live cloud production or night in, night out, signal distribution to linear content and nonlinear content providers.
So what we're talking about here is getting all the video in the cloud. Let's switch gears a little bit and start talking about the data that we have that the league's collecting. And it's interesting because, well, let me move forward here. I'm gonna run this animation. Do you want to talk us through this a little bit? There we go.
I can. You're actually looking at our edge data. The year 2020, there wasn't much going on in the world, so the NHL decided to install a tracking system in every building, and I decided to change careers because, it was a good time to. And, we had some periods where there weren't games being played, but what it did was it allowed us to really kind of hone things in and get things scalable and productized, if you would. So you're seeing players move around in a clip from our website, NHL.com, and we have a tag on players, and we have a puck that has lights in it. There's cameras up above. It's an infrared system, picks up the movement of the players. 60 times a second, we're getting the puck. 12 times a second, we're getting the players on the ice. Once a second, we're getting the players on the bench. Grant, what was the total you gave me before?
So on a 10-game night, we are seeing 1.5 billion data points per period of play.
Wait a minute, let's say that again. Say it again. On
So
a 10-game night.
On a night where we have 10 games, 20 teams involved, we've got 1.5 billion data points captured every period of play.
Right. And so
almost 5 billion in a game, in a night.
So just actually producing that, what goes into it, there's a suitcase full of tags, backup tags. Equipment managers in the league have a few of them, one for home and one they travel with. They're responsible for putting the tags in above the players' nameplates. It happens to be off center. Julie loves this story, as do I. And this is where the question and answer, or just raise your hand if you have a clue. The first night they tested this, players were popping in and out. It was not an NHL game. Players were popping in and out. And of course, I wasn't with the league at that point, but panic was setting in. Why isn't this working? We're testing this. We've seen this before. Now we're testing it in bulk, and we are losing players sporadically, left and right, all over the ice. Anybody have a clue why? And I will say that the hint is, at first, the tag was centered, right on the spine. There's still certain players in the league that have problems with this.
You got a guess?
Was not contact, no.
Yes.
It was hair.
And who were you testing on?
We were testing with a high school girls team, I believe, or 2 high school girls teams. And every time the ponytail swung back and forth, line of sight was broken. Players disappeared temporarily and then came back. So we moved them off center to deal with that. So players like Mika Zibanejad still may have some occlusion from time to time.
But
the mullet is not entirely dead.
No, and nor should it be, quite frankly. We still need to account for flow. Anyway, so you can imagine that operationally, it's quite a task for the NHL to pull this off alone. But how do we keep the lights on, so to speak, and also get ahead of the curve? And that's where a partner like AWS comes in with so many tools that help us get further quicker while we also try to, optimize the way we do things. And that leads to some of the projects we've done with AWS since the partnership began.
Here we are, we're collecting really granular data during play. The question then becomes, what do we ask of this data? What do we do with this data? I know that many of you at the leagues are always talking about, well, a lot of what we do is in service of the fan and engaging fans.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna switch to the next slide.
Yep.
And you're gonna talk us through some of the analytics we worked on together to drive that engagement.
I can tell you first off, I was a Boston Bruins video coach for about 9 years. And in that time, I had to sit at a keyboard during the games, flag things for coaches, capture video, worked for a company then, worked with the NHL to actually put the first iPads on the bench. That's where Grant and I first met, setting up wireless access points, trying to stream video, not interfering with beer sales behind the bench. That was probably something that would be frowned upon by most owners if we did that. So it's been an interesting career to kind of watch how everything comes together. And you brought up the idea of storytelling. And the league is full of talent, and it's not just on the ice. We have so many brilliant analysts around the league. While I manually tracked data, I am one that says now data should be telling us things. We want to try to interact and keep the subjectivity and out of it as much as possible. And tonight you'll see some of the things, or today you'll see some of the things that we actually did with that in mind, using machine learning, and even just really operationalizing and pipelining data to TV trucks, to broadcasters in bulk. So when we first started these projects, we really wanted to get something out quickly. We really wanted to get something that could cut into shots and saves. Something that allowed people to look back across 12 years worth of data and say, in the last 2 minutes of the second period, what does this player's shot map look like? And are they efficient shooting from different areas? Really slice into the data well. And it was something that we could get out quickly and we could use quickly, and it didn't take a lot of explanation. To make sure it didn't take a lot of explanation, we spent about 3 minutes thinking about the name. We called it shot and save analytics because that's what it does. It analyzes shots and saves. So while we spent a lot of time thinking about how you could slice into it, we didn't spend a lot of time in the name, but that was okay. And of course, when you do something like that, you're really hoping somebody says, I really want to compare two shooters, or I want to see where this player is compared to the rest of the league. And a lot of the times we saw people wanting to see where Alexander Ovechkin shoots the puck from, which, yeah, you still want to see that percentage. You want to know that if he slides closer to the net, does the percentage go up? Does the percentage go down? So it allowed us to pipeline this data out. You see one graphical representation. It would be up to the second in a game, by the way, so you could run this coming out of a TV timeout and see what a goalie's save percentage is from all the regions on the ice. You could then have a second graphic prepared to be able to show that goalie save percentage over the last 3 seasons to see how it compares, or this season, right? So being able to get data out quickly and pivot and get returns fast was our introduction to the broadcasters with the Edge IQ product through shot and save analytics.
Awesome.
Pause and see if you guys have anything to add to that. I mean, Andrew, you were here with that too, and
yeah, I think what's interesting and fascinating with all these analytics is there's not one way to create them, and the data is very versatile, and it goes the same for what we were going to talk about with video and production, is that there's not one way that you can do it, and there's not one method to create. Every one of these analytics is created differently, and I think what we realize, even on that last slide, with seeing that view, which is on NHL.com, it's such a cool way to watch a play, and that's just raw data. So even the raw data is usable and digestible, and you're seeing a whole play break down, not with players. And I think that's what we've learned is sometimes just the raw data, like Brant was saying with shot and save analytics, is there's not as much around it as maybe some of the others, but it's still interesting and insightful.
We'll show that a little bit.
I think the other important part about producing these analytics has really been the evangelical effort at the end to go and really communicate directly with the broadcasters and start to kind of coach them about how to tell stories using this data, right?
Sure.
And what, kind of what the meaning of it is from our perspective, right? So that they understand how to bring the fan in and really make them understand and engage with the insights that are being provided.
I think it was a two-way street there too for us. I mean, I was coming from the coaching world and started interacting with broadcasters more, other than going to the truck and asking why I wasn't getting a feed. And what we learned from the broadcasters really is they look at 3 different places the data or graphics can be used. One is during the game, the second is during the game, and the third is in studio. But if we go back to the 2 in-game, it's live during the play, and then the second one is during a stoppage. The problem is the stoppages are full with advertising and the desire to just show a replay of the previous play. So that's kind of a congested area. Studio is great. You can do some deep dives, but the viewership during studios isn't always great. People go up and leave the room to get a snack or whatever, and they don't see necessarily the data get put over the game live. So what the request was, how do you produce something? Can you produce something for us that we can use in all 3? So the next one really was where we learned that, because we said, okay, we really want to do something now that uses the tracking data, because despite analyzing, you can see the regions there with shot and save analytics, we looked at where shots came from, we looked at where goals were scored. We kind of created these regions in a radial fashion coming out from the net, because goaltenders don't square up straight to the goal line, they kind of square up in a radial fashion. And we developed those regions that you can actually see on the Edge website today. But we didn't have anything that you could use during a game live. If you wanted to show something, someone had to go pull a stat. It wasn't something that just popped up on the screen automatically, and it didn't use the tracking data. So we said, all right, something that happens 60 or so times a game are face-offs. They're a little sporadic in when they happen, but we need to do something around face-offs. How do we look at what's generally a coin flip, but look at it more from where's the face-off, who are the 2 centers, what's the history between the 2 centers, are they righties or lefties, and how do we get it so that it just pops up on the screen, because that was feedback we got from the broadcasters. It's something we learned. And face-off probability actually looks at where the puck is to figure out where the face-off is going to be during a stoppage. It immediately starts calculating all the players on the ice, who the likely people are to take the face-off for both teams, then goes a step further and says, here is the probable matchups, 4 different matchups. You only ever see one, but there are 4 probable matchups we're putting out with sub-second latency, the second the whistle blows at a stoppage. Once we figure out that the puck's at a dot, We make another jump, and we work towards determining through the proximity to the face-off dot. And then as players step in, we kind of finalize what that probability is. And the first game we tested this was here in Las Vegas. And I remember looking at the ice, watching a center get thrown out for a pre-drop violation. And I said, well, this will be interesting. And I looked down at my laptop screen, and I thought the players we had were wrong, but it had already adjusted for the new player coming in that quickly. And I was a believer. I was like, wow, is this neat? I mean, you're literally going to be able to see this on the fly with the graphics people are going to be able to put out. And the first one we used in-game, the first placement actually had a center get thrown out, and the broadcasters were like, wow, look how fast the numbers are changing around. It was really a cool moment to see the tracking data brought to life, but not only in a sprite view, we're calculating this stuff live based off of the infrastructure AWS wrapped around it. I mean, that was fascinating to look at.
I mean, a lot of these analytics, too, when you talk about it, at the end of the day, this is all to get people understanding that the game that they're watching and more engaged in it, too. So sometimes we hear about analytics in sports like, is this too heady? Are you putting too much data into the game? Is it taking away some of the ethos? We're going to show some examples later, and we can talk about how I think just the opposite happens, but especially as you're talking about globalization in sport or bringing new fans into the sport, especially such a fast-paced game like hockey. How do you get folks understanding what they're watching and why does this matter? Let's talk. I love Ice Tilt. We can talk about that, but do you want to talk a little bit through opportunity analysis and then get to Ice Tilt? Because
for sure,
you get to some of these things that, like, we know gut, in our gut, these are things that people believe in the game of hockey. We're putting math to it. We're putting science behind it.
I'll add, too, just on face-off probability before we go to that, something you said, and going back to what you said about feedback from broadcasters. John Buccigross, I asked him what he thought about face-off probability, John Buccigross of ESPN, and he said, I love it because it pops up on the screen. I can talk about it. I don't have to talk about it. It's self-explanatory. The viewers always get something about it. But then at the same time, you'll get these deep interpretations from the color analyst who says, oh, I can probably see on that one why they're saying that, and that's because this guy on that face-off is trying to win the puck to the boards, and it's not a real advantageous play for him. It's really interesting. That's the storytelling we're looking to unlock. We don't want to be too heavy-handed. The data doesn't need to tell the full story when you have somebody in a booth that's played 800 games in the NHL. It's really just about unlocking that, So we have been challenged with doing things that are in line with, let's say, QBR. And people want goalie ratings. Well, to get to something like that, I think QBR took 7 years to produce. We really need to start laying groundwork to get there. So we went back to shots, and we looked at the tracking data around shots. And we developed something that could produce not only a projected goal rate to determine the likelihood of the shot being a goal, but real-world values for the features in that model. There's actually 4 models based off of 4 different play types. We produce the real-world values, like if you can see that, we have the goalie, the shooter's distance, the goalie's distance to the goal line, the goalie angle, the distance to the goal line of the puck, puck speed variation. I could talk a little more about that in a second, right? So we're actually producing these real-world data points. But then behind the scenes, we're also producing the SHAP values that indicate the impact of each one of those that allow us to get to that projected goal rate, right? So you're getting a projected goal rate, which, by the way, can show up on a ticker after a shot now, which is really exciting because, again, it's called something that's pretty self-explanatory. It pops up, they can talk about it, they don't necessarily have to. But if they want to do that replay segment, they can talk about, puck speed variation, which, if anybody knows Colby Armstrong, he's another broadcaster around the league, they talk about the mixer a lot. The mixer is when you throw a puck at the front of the net and hope for good things. Puck speed variation literally shows that. You fire a puck at high velocity towards the net, it hits a defenseman, falls on the ice, the velocity stops. So the puck's going 85 miles an hour, it's going 0. That's what that's calling out. You're basically seeing that on this chance, there was so much chaos in this play in front of the net that it's a tough situation for goaltenders and defenders to find the puck. So we're actually now producing not just what the likelihood of scoring is, but the reasons why, and more storytelling components to say that goaltender was 90 degrees off the angle of the puck on that shot attempt. And that happened because it was a great pass, and we're really just giving more nuggets of information to tell stories from with it.
And that's where the numbers can meet the eye test with analysts. You know, it doesn't have to be numbers, and the old school mentality of no numbers. When we come up with an interesting insight, or when we've met with on-air talent and we point something out, they come up with, oh, well, the reason why they had such a great opportunity was, look at this movement, look at this stick communication, and there's a pass, and they have a great projected goal rate. It's those things that fans aren't picking up on until analysts are like, no, this is why the projected goal rate was higher, or why it was lower. The goalie was tracked the puck all the way through. So that's where the numbers and the eye test can coexist.
So let's talk about ice tilt, and then
I will.
We got more slides, guys.
I'm going to pause. We had the great story about opportunity analysis was we did a segment with NHL Network. If anybody wants homework, you can go look up NHL Network, Devan Dubnyk, pass off pads. We found an example from 2 playoffs ago where Florida Panthers against Boston Bruins, I think it was Game 6, it was a 2-on-1. Carter Verhaeghe, Matthew Tkachuk.
Yes.
Verhaeghe's on his offside at the hash marks in a 2-on-1. We brought it to Devan Dubnyk and Mike Rupp, who were going to be the on-air talent for the segment. And we started talking about pass-off pads because Verhaeghe shoots it low on the ice, rebound, Tkachuk gets it. So we showed the projected goal rate on both. Obviously, it's a solid projected goal rate for a player who's in that area, but the goaltender's square. The rebound was off the charts, and it called out exactly what the complexity of the play was. But Devan Dubnyk, that was supposed to be a 5-minute segment, and it turned into a 15-minute segment on NHL Network because they took it and ran with it. They asked the producers for a net. They wanted pads. They wanted to do all of it because of the way we unlocked it. It's such a great segment. And Devan Dubnyk said, there's no way on that one I'm worried about rebound control. He's inside the dots. He's at the hash mark on his forehand side. I have to make a save. I don't care where it goes afterwards. If he scores in the rebound, they're going to be mad we gave up a 2-on-1. They're not going to be mad at me. So it was another cool moment where the talent took the story and ran with it. But moving on to ice tilt. We had a chance at the All-Star game last year to present this to Jack Hughes. And Jack Hughes showed up, and we were talking about a few different things, and I had a chance to ask Jack Hughes, when you feel like your team is taking over the game, what are the things you're seeing when it comes to territorial momentum? And he said, well, for 3 or 4 shifts in a row, we're going over the boards, and the other team isn't really advancing the puck up the ice. Paraphrasing. The team's really not moving the puck up the ice. We're kind of hemming them in. We're getting some chances, but we're recovering every shot, and we're really just stopping them from getting up ice. It's like tilting the ice. And I laughed, and I said, that's perfect, because we called it ice tilt. And he's like, you're really calling it ice tilt? They said, we're calling it ice tilt. It was a completely organic moment. We've heard about ice tilt for decades now on broadcasts. They're really tilting the ice against us. What does that mean? We have something called zone time. Zone time measures where the puck is. But if you watch the game, how much does the puck move around? I mean, the puck is sometimes behind the play. Sometimes it's in front of the play. Sometimes it's in the middle of the play. The puck is rather inconsequential if you want to be specific about where the play is located. So ice tilt looks at those tags. It gives us the average location of all the players on the ice over a 2-minute span. So you take that one location, you add the 2 minutes previous to it, and that gives us that territorial momentum. And Jack Hughes described it perfectly. And as an aside to this, just to show how technology has evolved so much, trivia question. Any Bruins fans in here? Okay, one. All right. So you're probably the only one who'll get this, and this is...
You got another couple back there.
I'm sorry. All right, listen, I didn't see your hand. Sorry. This is a stretch. Anybody know who, my first year with the Bruins, Robbie Ftorek was the head coach, 2 assistant coaches, 2002. Boy, that sounds a long time ago, doesn't it? Yeah. 2002, the assistant coaches were... No idea. Okay, head shake. One was Wayne Cashman, which was awesome that I get to work with a legend like that. And the other one was equally as cool. It was Jack Hughes' father, Jim Hughes, right? So my career has now spanned cutting up video using VHS tapes to explaining a machine learning model to an NHL All-Star who happens to be the son of one of the coaches I was on my first staff with. So it's really an amazing moment to sit here and reinvent and talk about where technology has gone in the last 20 years and how fast it's now evolving exponentially.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real story here is that we all, anybody who's a hockey fan could always basically say, oh, that was a really good chance, and you knew it when you saw it, right? And similarly, you knew which team had the kind of the momentum when you saw it. But to be able to actually go and use technology to apply a why to that was an amazing leap,
Yeah, I often say, again, we know these things in our gut, but let's put the math to it. Let's prove it out. Let us explain why, right? Because I've been to games with Andrew where he is talking about the opportunity and I'm enough already with the opportunity. But really being able to explain to people why and why this matters, I think it does drive engagement. Let's flip over a little bit. Andrew, I'm going to let you go through some of these architecture slides and just talk about how we're capturing this data and how it's getting out there, and then we'll move along to some of the production stuff.
And I mentioned it briefly before, but one of my favorite components is the versatility and how all these analytics are created a little bit differently. And really it starts from the puck and player tracking data and the hockey information tracking system, also known as HITS, but bringing those data sources together. When you think about Ice Tilt, really using puck and player tracking data through Amazon Kinesis data streams, ultimately out to the viewer to track momentum, territorial advantage. And then you have something like face-off probability, which is taking both data sources, putting them through machine learning, SageMaker, you're putting all those components in a blender and outputting a probability. So it's really cool and unique how all these analytics come to life in different ways.
All right, let's move along. We're going to talk about live cloud production because this is where I think did you guys want to say anything else about analytics before we jump in here? Because I think we come back to the analytics.
No, we
again.
could always come back to analytics. And I
Right.
like to think we're going to sprinkle a little analytics on everything.
We'll come
This
back.
is the pie show where we're at the filling portion, but we haven't put the top on yet. We got to continue.
Yes. All right. So
And
we're
then
going
we
to
talk
keep
about the
going, then
pie
we'll
more
come back
later.
and mash it all up. All right. So live cloud production. This has been a journey, and you guys, I think, have led the industry, not just sports, but media, in really pushing the boundaries of what can be done in the cloud. And this is a combination of all of those things coming together. The scheduling and encoding as being sort of that baseline infrastructure that needed to be set up to enable some of this. So the timeline, we can go through this timeline a little bit. This started a couple years ago. The NHL had a tech showcase in Seattle. What are we going to showcase? I don't know, let's try producing a game in the cloud, right? So it was a Ducks-Kraken game. I didn't know I was going to talk through this slide, but I'm on a roll, so here I go. So this game, what was really exciting about this is we had all of the cameras in Seattle going into an encoding rack. There was no truck outside producing this broadcast. All of those feeds from the encoding rack went to the cloud. My favorite thing about that experience is we had the sort of a monitor split screen, and it had the technical director, replay 1, replay 2, right? Technical director was in Madison, Wisconsin, replay 1 in Toronto, replay 2, I believe, in Vancouver. Nobody producing that game was in the building, and we were watching that broadcast. No discernible latency, same high quality, same cut-ins that you can get, live look-ins to other games, graphics, all of that.
And no VHS tapes involved.
No VHS.
Amazing.
Well, I think the other special thing about it is because we really were super happy and surprised really that we're producing this game entirely in the cloud and we're seeing the signal come back to us. And you would be hard pressed to say that it wasn't almost exactly in sync with what we were looking at on the ice 200 feet down in the lower part of the arena.
100%.
And to be able to basically go and have an entirely remote production come back into the arena in with less latency than what we normally see on TV was amazing, right? Because that opened a lot of doors.
Yeah.
Right? Because you start to think about, hey, if we could do this, we could get this video into the hands of fans that are in the stands almost immediately, so that if let's say they had a seat down behind one of the goals and there was an extended period of play at the other end and they had a hard time really seeing it and they didn't want to crane their neck up at the Jumbotron from down in the lower bowl, they could just grab their phone and see what was going on the other end of the ice. That's certainly just a one-off of what's possible there, but
Well, you're hitting the flexibility, right? So this is, I think this, for all of us.
The one more interesting thing was that the person that actually produced all the graphics on the broadcast was an Amazon project manager who had never operated a graphics system in their life, sat down in front of a touchscreen system and ran broadcast graphics for the entirety of the game.
Amazing.
Awesome.
And had an absolutely great time doing it.
Yeah, she was, I think that just sort of, I think she was like 3 weeks in at Amazon too. Like she was like, holy cow. But it's cool because that was the journey that we started, and then you guys did preseason in Melbourne, Australia. So once it's in the cloud, you can start doing more interesting things with it, which is where we're going with this whole story. You guys produced the world feed in 3 different languages, 3 different graphics packages, and right, no, Latvian, what do we say? Latvian, French, and German on this. That led to, which is one of my favorite days in history, March 22nd of this year, where the NHL became the first league in North America to produce and distribute a game entirely in the cloud. When you did that, it all opened up some flexibility and ability to do something new and creative. Also, I'm going to get this point in because you know it's my favorite stat about this. By producing that game in the cloud, the league did not emit 2.05 metric tons of carbon dioxide. To counteract 2.05 metric tons of carbon dioxide, if you needed to, you'd have to plant 34 trees and grow them for 10 years. So at scale, producing in the cloud has a real capability to drive positive environmental impact in our industry, right? So I think this is, we're not, you guys, you've said this before, we're not going back. We're not going back on this, right?
You know, I mean, there's no reason to go back. The amount of things that we kind of learned along the way that came as ancillary benefits to doing all this work was amazing, and it continues to be.
Yeah. So then let's talk about when we did that, we were also able to produce an alternate feed, and Brant became on-air talent.
Somehow.
Let's do the architecture, and then we can show some of these alternate feeds and what this unlocks and enables. Andrew.
Yeah, and I think, going along the same theme of the versatility, the same kind of mentality of working with the NHL with the data and the analytics applies also to the video, because with production there are many different ways that you can produce a show. And I think what was really cool about the Tech Showcase in 2023 was the initial intent was, let's produce this game. But then we said, well, wait a minute, with encoding and scheduling, we have all the feeds coming into our cloud-based control room. So let's zip in and out of games as live updates while we're doing and producing the show. So now during a commercial break, Julie and I are arguing over, do we show the Rangers game or the Bruins game? Oh, let's do a double box. Oh, let's go back to the Kraken Ducks game. So we just saw the versatility, and Grant said, one of my favorite lines Grant says all the time is, we can now do something that a production truck can't. And the fact that we're not bound to one facility or one place, since all the video is in the cloud, we can access all these video streams, and we're not limited with the types of things that we can do. And that goes into March 22nd, a little bit of the mentality of, let's create more content. Let's use all these tools that are
really, I think, all through this, we really took a very AWS type view of engineering this. And that was, the Tech Showcase was much about the creation of the show. So the actual mechanics of pressing a button on a switcher and switching feeds and doing the graphics and really orchestrating that layer of it. And then we went and did the Australia feed, and that was really about the distribution side of the equation. And so we said, okay, so we're not gonna try to solve creation and distribution in the same step. We're gonna break those into manageable components, and we're gonna solve creation first, and then we're gonna work on distribution. And then we have our roadmap for what we want to develop to be able to do what we did on the 22nd.
That's a good point. And I think we're starting to see this in the industry too, where broadcasters are looking at live cloud production and breaking that down a little bit and taking particular work streams, parts of the production workflow to the cloud, whether it's ingest or edit or things like that. So I think that's how the industry is starting to look at it too. And I think you guys have gotten there a little bit faster, and it's unlocked some of these really interesting opportunities. Andrew, are you done with this slide?
Yeah, you
can we?
Yeah, you can.
Let's.
And well, I think too, to that point, Julie, and when you look at this slide, the architecture side and the infrastructure, AWS is the infrastructure. We're relying heavily on our partners so that, to switch a show or punch replays or cut graphics, that experience should be the same if it's hosted in the cloud or if it's in a production truck or a traditional control room. So we're relying heavily on our partners to help make that experience one-to-one. And the other thing that I think is really unique and interesting, and why I love this collaboration so much, is the NHL has looked at taking different components and using these tools. So maybe they're not going to do a full end-to-end production tomorrow, but let's use Media Connect to enable more seamless ingest or distribution. So really leaning in and using these tools to create more content. And that goes to the other component of the March 22nd game was the NHL Edge Unlocked, where in addition to the end-to-end broadcast that was all in the cloud, we also had an alternate broadcast focused on analytics, which again goes to the idea of let's try new ways to create more content using the cloud.
So a couple things. You made a point that's a good one, which is sort of the partner ecosystem in this too. And just to brag on all of us a little bit, we all did win an award with a lot of those partners in the ecosystem on this live cloud production thing. So it does really take a village and an ecosystem of partners to get this moving. Andrew, the alternate broadcast, can I go to show that? I want to say the NHL Edge Unlocked datacast that we did for this game also inspired your traditional broadcast partners in the US to lean into this for the Western Conference Finals. So I think we have a clip here that I think I might have both of these in here.
The second period ice tilt, part of NHL Edge IQ, powered by AWS. Yep. Dallas Stars. 7:58.
We have a long way to go to catch that time that Edmonton put in the first period, but in that time too, 7:58, 3 goals. Ice tilt, the number goes up for Dallas. The decibels go down in Edmonton. They're in shock
to
right now.
library level. We're at library level.
That'll be next.
That's your advanced stat for it. That's what I'm providing. 17 shots now for Dallas on goal.
Draisaitl on his weak side here. Ben's on his strong side.
I go Ben.
You think so?
I'm going Ben.
Certainly had a better night tonight in the circle.
Nope.
Clutch face-off win. Draisaitl.
4-3.
Flipped up and deflected out of play.
Can I just, I want to just make this point because again, I go back to the people who are like, the analytics, make it not as, more dry or more. When they did this, did you guys see those numbers at the bottom of like time on ice? Western Conference Finals, I didn't care about the Western Conference Finals, if I'm being honest with you. I didn't care. And I'm watching this game and they're showing time on ice and they have all the 5 skaters on one side, the numbers are going red. They've eclipsed the 45-second shift mark, right? So these are tired legs. Then you have the entire other side, fresh green, the numbers were green. You just got on the ice. I was like full on sweat watching this at home. And I'm like, shift change. I'm like yelling at my I didn't care about this game. And yet I'm very emotionally invested. And it's because of those little numbers at the bottom of the screen. It was amazing to me to see that on an anecdotal level. And again, it gets back to like, how do we present this data in a way that sparks that interest and lets people understand. What I'm watching here is a team the ice is starting to tilt, but you also see tired legs on one side. That might be part of that story, right? Let's talk, so that's one way of imagining it. You guys have been on the forefront of these alternate broadcasts and they are so fun. I want to show, you guys have this 2 years in a row, Big City Greens. This is leveraging all the tracking data that's going on, but we're using other IP.
Big City Greens, take one. We're completely animated. That's how we look for real. Yeah, exactly.
Got to return, he scores!
So what I loved about this, you guys, this is 2 years in a row. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think the first year you guys ran the Big City Greens, it completely flipped your demo watching it. You went from primarily male to primarily female, average age dropped 20 years. The sweet spot was tween girls. How awesome is that? Tween girls are watching hockey because...
Well, I think the datacast also did the same thing, which is really, lots of people have different things that make them happy, right? And ultimately, the ability to go and actually present the game to different audiences in different ways that meets them where it's meaningful to them is what we have to do. And these tools are really enabling that in a huge way.
Well, that's it. It's taking the content and making it a little bit more compelling to maybe disparate audiences, and therefore bringing them in a lot closer than, look, to some extent, we've been confined by the historical one-to-many linear distribution method, right? You have to deliver the least offensive broadcasts to as many people as possible because you've got this broadcast pipe. Now, with streaming platforms, you can choose your own venture. You can opt in. I want to see the Big City Greens version. I want to see a data cast. Or, I love this one. We can make our game more accessible. That was this season, yeah? Was this
Stanley Cup final?
For Stanley Cup final.
Stanley Cup final.
American Sign Language. That's amazing.
It's the experience, like that there alone is worth it, right? When you've made the broadcast experience that much more engrossing when someone can't experience it the way you traditionally do.
Right.
And you go back to Grant's point, you might be a goaltender and you might want to watch the game from the goaltender's perspective. You might want to watch it with data that pertains to shots or the goaltender himself, right? So like that experience is now completely fathomable on a mobile device, whether it's an iPad or really any device, any streaming device. You could customize your own experience watching a game. How much do you want the camera? Maybe you prefer the game without the announcers. Miking players up in the future has some concerns, but like being able to hear the players communicate as a coach, it's always fascinating to know what was said between the players on a play, right? You watch a goaltender mishandle a puck. Well, did the defenseman tell him he had time? Right? Being able to actually get those insights into the game for coaching, maybe not fans, is really powerful as well. And that all happens because of the lack of latency in producing this and the ability to customize things. I really think, one of my favorite moments from the Big City Greens event, I think it was the first one, someone was live tweeting, watching their 8 or 9-year-old daughter watch the game. And it was adorable. As a dad, it was adorable. Like the father was talking about one of the characters as they appeared wasn't wearing a helmet. And the daughter was completely taken by the fact that one player was not wearing a helmet and it was not safe. So the father
was a cartoon character, but not a helmet.
The player without the helmet is back on the ice, and my daughter is not happy about it. But again, isn't that amazing? Right now, you've got a child who maybe wouldn't watch a traditional hockey broadcast just because of attention span, and there's a whole other side to how we actually get them to watch the traditional broadcast. But does this break the ice to add that generation and get them to understand the game more?
Well, yeah, that was the one where we all said, you know what, there's this generational fragmentation in the way people consume content. And nothing illustrates this better than the fact that I get my wife yelling from the other room on at least a couple of occasions a week, can you turn these captions off?
Yeah.
Because the kids turn the captions on the TV all the time because they want to see because they like to be able to basically multitask on their phone and be able to still follow along with what's going on, and having the captions helps them do that.
Yep.
And so, but my wife is like, I hate having the captions. I want to watch what I'm watching.
Yep.
So turn them off.
Right.
And it's illustrative of that, really, is that, the generations see things in a very different light, and we have to keep stretching our legs, technology-wise, to be able to meet them where they are, because ultimately we want everybody to be a hockey fan if we can get there,
Yeah.
And I think too, like to go back to your, I won't call it a rant, it was great.
Rant.
The whole thing about, we have the rant, we have Grant, we have Brant. I mean, it's just I don't know what we're going to call you. Anyway, so if you go back and look at the ticker down the bottom of the screen with the time on ice, the current time on ice, for those of you who really follow hockey, that's so critical. And for newer fans, they don't understand why players change so frequently. But they've proven.
Well, I mean, honestly, for generations, there were people who didn't even know that they really changed that way at all. Really it didn't sink in for folks.
Right.
You know, and that was the kind of the difference when you went to your first hockey game, is you're like, these guys do this all the time? You know, and it's kind of eye-opening for somebody who wasn't a fan to go and discover that, hey, you know, that we're one of the only sports in the world that has live substitutions, and it happens often.
Right. And again, so maybe you like watching the wide view of the ice so that you can actually see those happening. I mean, you watch the chaos that happens in front of a bench in a game, and it's critical. You can also watch line matching that way. You can watch interaction between the players when they go off the ice.
And you see how line changes affect the way that play world
100%
plays out, you know, because, you know, certainly a bad line change is a good way to jack the opportunity analysis number way up.
That's
right?
true, and the ice tilt as well, right? Like that's a goal of tilting the ice, is you want to get a line change out on the other team while they're hemmed in their own zone. And you know, I think when the Western Conference Finals happened, and I was actually on the headset with the talent for that, and one of the things I said right away is, might be hard for you guys to keep an eye on it, but I will try to start talking about it before the numbers go red in your ear, right? So if a team's in the offensive zone and they've been out for 40 seconds, they need to change, because if the puck goes the other way, now they're going to be out in the ice for a minute and 30 seconds, and you're going to see the ice tilt the other way. So just being able to focus on that, you know, I think the data cast so far, we still don't know what a data cast looks like. 7 games of it just that we've been involved with. We're still throwing stuff at the wall. I feel like there's times where we're putting so much on the screen that it just leaves such a great opportunity to think about how we actually put it on the ice more, like the shot regions on the ice, or showing on that face-off where the shots have come from that period, right? Like being able to not necessarily put it on an L bar where you have to take your eyes off the game and look down the bottom. Can you tag a player with a red tag when they've been on the ice for too long? It's been proven, just looking at shot differential, that when you've been on the ice for longer than 40 seconds, your shot differential numbers swing very negative very quick, right? So like, how do we start to just actually build that into a traditional broadcast? Because that heightens the the experience during a game to know that there is pending danger here for this.
Well, yeah, it adds a narrative tension to what you're seeing that didn't exist without it.
Right.
It also gives you a playground, right? These alternate broadcasts gives you an opportunity to experiment and play. And I'm going to switch sports for a second, because I think you've seen this on Thursday Night Football with the Prime Vision broadcast, which is the data cast for the NFL and Prime Video, right? They were able to experiment with some of these augmentations to draw attention to something like potential blitzer or whatnot. And it was so impactful that they were able actually to port that into the regular traditional broadcast, right? So you're learning things in all of this. Let us say, hey, how can we actually weave things in? Again, it's the artful application of this data and this augmentation to actually drive engagement in that one-to-many funnel as well, right? So I think I just have one slide here. We only have a couple minutes left, but you know, what are you guys excited about? What's next? I mean, I think we're continuing to experiment in this space.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. One of the things I'm excited about is that as we kind of got into this journey, after March 22nd, we also did a live switch show on the show floor at NAB here in Las Vegas last year. Yep. Which we were subsequently awarded for at IBC in September. And so, you know, I think what's next is really we start looking at all of the components of the live cloud broadcast, so the replay component. Because you've now got 12 ISOs sitting in your replay system in the cloud, because you're not limited by what's available in local storage on the truck, is that now you've got potentially the ability to supercharge your highlight product and to really basically make highlights even more compelling. And that was just kind of a ancillary benefit of actually doing all the work to get the live cloud production off the ground. And you really start to understand, well, all of these individual components have powerful kind of use cases of their own. And, so I think we're really looking to be able to lean in there and be able to really start to leverage the ability to identify content, using AI in the future and being able to really, break everything down into an agent-based kind of content model that allows us to not only do a live cloud production, but also supercharge highlights on multiple platforms. Have one person basically have more narrative control because one person is creating a highlight package and it's then getting repurposed automatically for multiple different outlets and packaged in a way that's appropriate for each of them.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really powerful thing because certainly, for years we were kind of, for years we didn't have the World Wide Web for highlights, and you had to kind of wait until your team was up on the Sports Center rotation to be able to see, the goals that were just scored. And now
I had to record NHL Tonight, by the way. My first couple of years, I had to record NHL Tonight so we could have every goal in the league. No lie.
See?
Yeah, I mean, so you just don't realize like how far we've come there, but how much better we can actually be in the future is. Yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling, really.
Yeah, I joke around with video coaches when they complain about how long it takes to download a period to cut up. Did you ever bring a VHS deck to a sports bar on the road to tape a game? No? Okay, I'm not really worried about you taking an extra 15 minutes to download a game. I mean, it's amazing. I think I really am looking forward to, I think AI calling more insights out during the game and less mining to find insightful things. I think that's one really interesting way to do it. And I think like the traditional hockey broadcast, there have been changes, but nothing really major. And I think some of the experimenting we're doing with alternate feeds are gonna bleed into the regular broadcast, like you said. I mean, I think that idea of having time on ice, current time on ice displayed on a traditional broadcast is great. Not just always showing the red line camera, but making it so it's not intrusive, flipping cameras, breaking the 180 on people, on viewers. I think there's a lot to be said for the future of the game. People say when you watch the game live, it's completely different than when you watch the game on TV. Does it have to be? What can we do to show the speed more intimately to people at home and to show some of the line changes and some of the chaos behind it? The more vantage points we get in the game, the more likely we are to actually think about showing the game in a different way. I'm anxious to see how we can break up the norms that way. Like I said, I used to manually tag data, and the subjectivity that goes into it, to me, it compromises it. I want to learn more from the data itself. Let the data tell us more about the game and tell us how to track the game differently.
Any words from you, Andrew?
I'm really excited to see the evolution of the alternate broadcasts, even at scale, so that it's potentially a nightly or weekly occurrence. And I think when we go back to March 22nd, it took us 2 to 3 weeks to build our cloud-based production control room. Because we had the cloud resource, we were able to spin everything up. Usually it could take a year to commission a production truck or a control room, and I think enabling the NHL to create that content and to see all the great things that they're already doing, I mean, the best is yet to come, I think. I think it's great to just see all these different versions, and when you watch the data cast, I know you all have hit on different things that you like. For me, I loved seeing the distance skated because I had friends reaching out. I can't believe so-and-so skated for 7 miles throughout a game. It really puts things into perspective when you see all that, or implementing ice tilt. I remember I think it was the first or second time ice tilt was implemented into that game. It was the Oilers were tilting the ice and then they scored a goal. So as a fan, to get that indication that, okay, they're pushing here, look, they have the momentum, goal. That's awesome. And to give fans more choices and options, ways how they want to consume content, I think it's the future. And I think it's great to see how NHL and AWS are working together to help provide that experience for fans to help grow the game.
I mean, that's it. It's what's really great about this is there were this was not a big bang. This was a very deliberate sort of road we went down together, moving different parts of your infrastructure into a place that you could be this nimble and we can experiment in these ways. And just from a personal perspective, it's been a total pleasure working with you guys. I think we all push each other a little bit, and it's been, at least from my perspective, we don't feel like a tech vendor. We feel like an innovation partner with you guys.
No, I think we've always viewed AWS as part of the team, and hockey is probably the ultimate team sport, and certainly, hockey players tend to basically be fairly humble and want to be, recognized as a member of the team rather than as an individual, and I think that's the same approach that we've had with working with AWS.
More to come. Thanks, you guys. Thank all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.